that if he met a monster he could only run with being able to defend himself. Moreover, it takes a special way to trigger the skill. Jalao's situation bothered him a lot. Then Jalao looked at the weapons or facilities he had. He took out a sword and a pair of black gloves. Jalao was a little surprised to see that the healer's initial equipment was a sword. This young man immediately put on gloves and tried his sword. Jalao swung the sword right and left, then gripped it tightly with both hands. When he saw a fairly large boulder on his left, Jalao immediately slashed at it with one strike, splitting the boulder in two. From this, Jalao realized that the density and sturdiness of the swords in that place exceeded those of the swords in the real world. Jalao looked at the sword intently, thinking that it had the resilience it displayed. It was as if everything in the video game had been visualized. Suddenly Jalao's stomach growled loudly, so he planned to look for food while waiting for useful information to appear. Suddenly heard the sound of a beast growling. Jalao immediately looked back and wondered what that sound was. He stepped further into the cave and found a larger room. Jalao must secure his water source which is in the cave. While looking around, suddenly a large bone fell near Jalao. The young man turned to the other side where the bones fell and saw a pile of more bones. So many piles of bones in the mountains. Jalao picked up the bones that had fallen by his side to check. He realized he had seen bite marks left between the bones. Jalao immediately panicked when he realized what those claw marks were. He intended to run and leave the place when suddenly a wild werewolf monster appeared right in front of his face. The monster almost devoured Jalao's head just like that. Luckily Jalao managed to dodge in time. Jalao rolled far enough to avoid the opponent's attack. When Jalao felt safe, he received a report from the system that the monster he was facing now named Desert Wolf was a level 5 monster. This monster had large, sharp claws. He also has incredible speed when chasing enemies. That reaches 65 kilometers per hour. Plus this creature has a bite force of up to 200 kilograms. A level difference of more than 3 levels like this can have a devastating effect of up to 200% damage. Jalao groaned in annoyance while holding his injured right arm. He watched the monster closely. Jalao realized that this monster was faster than him, so he couldn't escape. Instead, Jalao will be pounced on by the creature quickly. So Jalao decided to draw the sword from the scabbard to fight the monsters. The look in his eyes that were full of determination seemed to say he would rather die after losing a fight than losing by running away. Jalao swiftly approached his enemy and immediately slashed mercilessly, but the young man's sword instead vibrated because of the hardness of the monster's body. Next, we are invited to reminisce about Jalao's past. Back in high school, this young man was already the chairman of the Feng Ji Kendo Club. He often trains harder in the club room than others, and even though he has won many awards, that doesn't dampen his enthusiasm to continue training. Jalao is also the youngest 6th Dan Kendo player to compete in Z City. When asked why pursue Kendo, the reason is very simple, because the mother is a big fan of a Kendo star. That's why he enrolled his son to learn Kendo. At first, Jalao thought that Kendo was just a place to show off pretty clothes, but when he started to seriously practice, then he understood that sport is not as easy as imagined. When seriously facing an enemy in a Kendo suit, hearing the breathing and heartbeats of fighting with that person creates a gripping feeling that can't be explained with any certainty. The sensation of fear was so strong that it swallowed up the energy in Jalao's body and made his movement slow. The climax of that horror is, bang, Jalao was hit, and he realized that he was still not strong enough to fight the enemies in the arena. The only way for Jalao to get stronger is to keep practicing and keep strengthening himself, then push himself to the limit. That's why Jalao often spends his free time in the dojo without air conditioning, to practice and repeat movements that are repeated thousands of times. In the beginning, Jalao continued to fail and was injured several times. Then he returned to continue to train consistently. He steadfastly and with all his might swung his arms to become the youngest 6th Dan Kendo player to compete in countries. Even so, Jalao promised not to stop practicing, because in a world where the law of the jungle prevails, the winner is the king, and you don't even know how terrible your next comrade will be. Jalao thought about this as he dodged the wolf attack again. Again Jalao turned to punch his opponent but missed. He must be hit by an enemy attack and fell into the rocks of the cave. When he got up again with a rush of breath, Jalao was amazed at the situation he had to face at this time. He was confused that the attack with his sword had no effect at all. Then a holographic screen appeared and announced that Jalao's attack was ineffective because the wolf had such a strong defense. The system also informed that the creature's weakness was in its stomach. From this, Jalao concluded that attacks other than the stomach would have no effect at all. Just finished thinking, the monster rushed back to Jalao at high speed. He looked very eager to pounce on Jalao. Fortunately, the young man managed to fend off the enemy's attack, then retreated a few meters to avoid a follow-up attack. Jalao scowled in annoyance because this opponent of his was extremely fast, and once he attacked, he would aim for the kill, making Jalao flustered. Jalao was already cornered at the edge of the cave. He was starting to get confused, thinking that if he just passively defended, he would soon die. Pointing a sword at the monster, Jalao started to wonder if he would die this soon. Meanwhile, the notification on the hologram kept telling me that Jalao's energy was running out. At a crucial moment like this, Jalao remembered that the creature had a weakness in the stomach. A crazy idea popped into Jalao's head. He immediately ran towards the monsters that came back to attack him. With full confidence, Jalao will try his crazy way. Jalao's right shoulder was bitten off by the monster's creature. Blood was shed, however. This time even Jalao was not to be outdone. He also stabbed the creature through its back. It was obvious that the creature couldn't survive Jalao's attack. After the creature died, Jalao pushed the creature off his sword. Jalao was quite happy about his victory this time. His plan to let the creature bite him and let his guard down succeeded in giving Jalao an opening to stab the monster. Even so, Jalao was already weak because the monster's attack just now was too strong. It was at this time that a holographic screen appeared announcing that Jalao had successfully killed the desert wolf. So he gets a lot of points and immediately rises to level 5. Jalao's body quickly gave off a bright light, make the young man's body recover as before. He felt more energized now. Jalao realized that after leveling up, the wounds on his body healed instantly. Jalao was surprised to see the notification. He saw a variety of great weapons in the shop. What do you think Jalao will buy to increase his strength? Chen Jalao said it was still in the game after all, so he would still gain experience after killing monsters. After that, this young man can upgrade with the skill points obtained to increase his attributes. Chen Jalao thought about this while sitting leisurely on a large, flat rock. He was surprised when he saw the hologram screen because there was a hidden shop option. He immediately pressed the unlock button and saw a lot of weapon attributes that had amazing abilities. The shop sells daily necessities such as medicine, weapons, armor, home appliances, and electronics. The system reminds us that a separate level is needed to increase inventory, and purchases in stores will also consume player levels. Chen Jalao swiped the hologram screen thinking that he could unlock all the services once he had a high level. But the young man was astonished and wondered who would want to buy a phone in a game. Then he realized that the mercenary system should be opened when he reached level 100, so he tried to open it. Then suddenly the system does the job by bringing out a beautiful woman who is the holographic form of the selected service. Chen Jalao was initially taken aback because the woman with the gun immediately pointed the sword right at his face. But then this young man realized that the figure before him was just some kind of holographic projection. Then many holographic circles appeared on the ground. From the circle appeared several figures with different skills and armor types. There are figures whose traits are offense type, defensive type, mage type, assassin type, and many more mercenary types. But the strangest thing was the female figure in front of him who was a service type. The girl wore very skimpy clothes and showed a very seductive face. Chen Jalao looked away from the girl thinking who developed this boring beginning. He shouted angrily at the person who programmed this system and wanted him to stay alone in that place forever. The system popped up and reminded us that with Chen Jalao's current level, he could only open common items. Chen Jalao complained angrily at the system because he already knew such a small stipulation. He didn't want the system to remind him to open some weird mercenary. Chen Jalao ended up just opening the daily necessities department to pick up sweet buns and drinking water stock. But just by opening those two things, Chen Jalao already lost 5 levels of his. Chen Jalao was now sitting down enjoying the food and thought that for the time being he could use the level he had obtained to turn it into food and drink. But he would do it anyway just because of an emergency like now. Chen Jalao then summoned the system to display the skill points just now. Immediately the system showed Chen Jalao's status window. This young man realized that even though his status had been restored, the conditions for using the skill were still unclear, and the point part cannot be changed after use. Chen Jalao is aware that the various attributes on the holographic screen will certainly have an effect on determining his future destiny. HP status determines the player's health, MP determines the number of magical attacks that can be issued, strength status determines physical strength, stamina status determines endurance, and agility determines Chen Jalao's agility. This young man realized that even though the wolf beast he had just killed was only 5 levels different, its strength and speed were definitely not on par with him. Chen Jalao realized that if he met a monster that was even stronger, he had to excel in speed and attack power. So Chen Jalao deliberately added several abilities at once. Chen Jalao decided he would add 5 points to the vitality ability to ensure his health, then add 10 strength points to guarantee the damage dealt to monsters. The remaining few points added to agility. This youth could instantly feel an extremely powerful effect within his body. His whole body felt filled with energy and became very light. Chen Jalao smiled as he realized the feeling of getting stronger was actually very pleasant. Suddenly several wolf monsters appeared at the mouth of the cave. Chen Jalao immediately got into a stance and thought that this was the right time to try out the effects of his increased strength. This time with full confidence, Chen Jalao jumped at the wolf beast and asked them to come forward forward because today he was willing to serve all the wolf beasts in their lair. With a single slash of his sword, Chen Zhulao succeeded in having one of the wolf beast's heads. Chen Zhulao realized that his attack power had become amplified to ignore the wolf beast's strength. With its mouth wide open, one of the wolf beasts tried to attack Chen Zhulao from behind, but this young man managed to turn around and slash the monster behind him with one strike. Chen Zhulao was aware that enhancing various attributes also strengthened his swordsmanship. With this kind of confidence, Chen Zhulao jumped into the crowd of wolf beasts while attacking them blindly. Chen Zhulao's blade slashed through all the monsters so easily as if they were nothing, until finally Chen Zhulao managed to meet the amount of X and managed to level up quickly. The system appeared and gave congratulations because Chen Zhulao managed to rise to level 15 with the acquisition of 24,000 X and 75 usable skill points. Chen Zhulao breathed a sigh of relief as he sat comfortably atop the pile of wolf monsters. Chen Zhulao smiled, realizing that it was true that after upgrading his abilities he could kill monsters more easily. The sky had turned dark when Chen Zhulao came out of the cave. This young man thought he could start looking for a way out because of the cold night air, and he also has got a stock of food and drink. But this young man's steps had to be stopped because he accidentally touched one of the wolf monster carcasses that were scattered in front of the cave. Chen Zhulao leaned over to one of the wolf beast corpses and wondered why there were so many corpses out there. Chen Zhulao's curiosity had not yet been lost when he suddenly saw a silhouette of a person killing a wolf monster on a nearby cliff. Chen Zhulao held his sword and immediately alerted when he saw a silhouette of a person standing tall while holding the two-tailed bodies of a wolf beast in both hands. Under the dim moonlight, Chen Zhulao couldn't see the figure's face clearly. Chen Zhulao was irritated and wondered who this person really was. Chen Zhulao ended up in a daze because when he narrowed his eyes the figure had suddenly disappeared. This young man turned his head in all directions thinking that this was very strange, even though earlier he was sure that someone on the cliff was holding two wolf monster corpses in his arms. Chen Zhulao quickly climbed onto the cliff to look around. He saw clearly that there were still two wolf beast bodies on top of the cliff. This young man started to wonder if there were other users trapped in that place like himself. Chen Zhulao stabbed one of the wolf beast's bodies, thinking that all of the monster's blood seemed to have been sucked out by something. Chen Zhulao wondered whether such a cruel method could be used by a player. This young man suddenly realized something just as the system popped up and gave a stern warning about the state of affairs. The system warns about detected forms of alien life presence. The system predicted that the monster's danger level was so high that Chen Zhulao had to leave the scene immediately. The system also confirmed that this individual was a tall figure. Chen Zhulao was warned to immediately dodge because this individual was starting to deal death blows. Quickly, a tentacle slid toward Chen Zhulao from behind. Luckily, this young man managed to avoid it in time and slashed the tentacles until blood dripped from his sword. Chen Zhulao realized in his head that it wasn't humans who killed the wolves, but high-level monsters. Just at that moment, a monster figure that had a human body but an ant head stepped casually in front of Chen Zhulao. Chen Zhulao's hand holding the sword trembled as he realized that this monster in front of him was not at all on the level of the wolf beast he had encountered earlier. He realized that if he hadn't increased his agility earlier, he would have become a corpse by now. Even though he managed to dodge in time, Chen Zhulao's stomach was still slashed by the monster's tentacles. Chen Zhulao was even more shocked when the monster in front of him was able to regenerate his severed arm. The system appears and informs that this monster's name is Adventure Dominator, but the level of this monster is still unknown. The system again announced that this monster was the absolute master of speed in the wasteland. This monster is at the top of the food chain and he likes to suck the blood of living things. So far, no one has been able to escape from his pursuit. Chen Zhulao thought that although he was prepared to meet all kinds of monsters, this monster before him was too strong. It was as if the monster was making him float and couldn't move, waiting to be chased by the monster. This is the first time Chen Zhulao has felt this kind of horror. While Chen Zhulao was thinking, suddenly the monster had moved very fast to attack him. Luckily, this youth managed to dodge sideways in time. Then he jumped high and tried to slash the monster, thinking that he wouldn't be afraid of the monster. But strangely, Chen Zhulao's sword strike that was strong enough landed on the ground instead. While still immersed in shock, suddenly the monster was beside him and gave a heavy blow, so that Chen Zhulao was thrown and rolled several meters. This young man managed to stop by using the power of the sword. Chen Zhulao now realized that this was the absolute speed previously described by the system. The monster muttered incoherently as it stared at Chen Zhulao. Before Chen Zhulao had even rested, the monster had already shot at him as fast as lightning and hit him in the stomach again. This time Chen Zhulao coughed up blood and realized that the punch just now could have killed him. Chen Zhulao wondered what that monster wanted. Apparently, the monster kicked Chen Zhulao so that the young man fell to the ground. When Chen Zhulao tried to get up, suddenly the monster was in front of him and handed Chen Zhulao's sword. This young man was shocked to see the attitude of the monster. Chen Zhulao wondered, what does that monster's attitude mean? Then the monster made a gesture with its hand to slash the monster's neck. Chen Zhulao was obviously shocked when he saw that the monster wanted Chen Zhulao to cut him down. Chen Zhulao felt deja vu when he was in this kind of situation. It was as if he was like a mouse that a cat had caught but didn't eat right away, but only to be played. The sun had started to rise as Chen Zhulao lay weakly with intermittent breathing. Even the durability of the weapon has been reduced by 80%. This young man had really been toyed with by the monster until morning. Chen Zhulao realized that the monster's speed was ridiculous. Ordinary attacks couldn't even hurt him. Suddenly the monster grabbed Chen Zhulao by the collar and lifted this young man up high. The monster said that humans are weak like insects. Chen Zhulao, who was annoyed to hear that, immediately slashed the arm of the monster that was gripping his neck. Then he jumped back a few meters. Chen Zhulao rebuked that it was the monster that was the bug. Casually the monster looked at his severed hand and managed to regenerate again. The monster commented that this human before him was very interesting. It had been hundreds of years since they last met this spirited human. Chen Zhulao smiled and said that it had been a long time since he felt such a tense and excited sensation as now. Chen Zhulao thought of the faces of his family, friends, and long life. Chen Zhulao thought that he must not die in this place. Then this young man shouted that everyone he knew had to wait for his return. Suddenly a light flashed from Chen Zhulao's body to create a long spear of light that pierced the sky. It was as if this young man had gained great strength that was so extraordinary that it filled all the cells in his body. Due to the strength of the will to fight, it seems that Chen Zhulao managed to activate the special blessing of the god Latnea. With this, all of Chen Zhulao's statuses rose by 100 points. The monster commented happily because his opponent now looked a little stronger. But before this monster had finished talking, suddenly Chen Zhulao was in front of him and slashed the monster's body with a sword. The monster's blood immediately sprayed in all directions, but Chen Zhulao still hadn't stopped his slashing attacks on the monster, until finally this young man's sword shattered. The system gives a warning that the durability of the weapon has reached 0%, so it is destroyed and cannot be used. Feeling that the sword was useless, Chen Zhulao immediately threw the sword in all directions and attacked the monster with his bare hands. This time the ant-headed monster was thrown so far that it crashed into a stone wall by Chen Zhulao's punch. This young man said that the monster's EXP would definitely be his, but strangely suddenly the monster disappeared from where he fell. It seemed that the monster was now right behind Chen Zhulao with a terrifyingly vicious expression. The monster used its true form to counterattack Chen Zhulao. The monster commented that Chen Zhulao was as stupid as a bug. Now with a battered body full of blood, Chen Zhulao realized that it was no longer possible for him to defeat the monster in front of him. The monster floated up and then with one arm created a death angel-shaped energy which was instantly hurled right at Chen Zhulao. Seeing the terrifying attack with his own eyes, Chen Zhulao was in his dying state wondering if he would die now. The system appeared and announced that player Chen Zhulao's HP had now reached 0%, so he died too. This time, RMC was completely defeated quickly. Chen Zhulao suddenly opened his eyes and immediately got up from his sleeping position. This young man is now lying comfortably on a bed in a simple wooden house. His breathing was so heavy and finally while thinking, is he still alive? And is he out of the game yet? This young man looked out the window of the house asking where else is this place? Because right in front of him now lay a tall green mountain under which there were simple village houses complete with rice fields. Chen Zhulao summoned the holographic screen and realized that he was still stuck in the game. This young man was immediately irritated and thought that this situation was not funny at all, even though he had clearly been killed with a lethal strike from that ant monster, but now he had completely woken up in this new place. There wasn't even a scar on his body. This young man partially opened his shirt and wondered how this situation could happen. Right at that moment, a beautiful girl with long red hair entered, carrying a bowl of water. This girl was shocked when she saw that Chen Zhulao had come to his senses. The two of them were silent for a moment, then Chen Zhulao greeted the girl. But the girl angrily turned around and shouted for Grandpa Albert while saying that Chen Zhulao had regained consciousness. Chen Zhulao, who was shocked at this situation, wondered if he was finally in the novice village. Meanwhile, Albert's grandfather was laying rice seeds in the rice field buns. Even though he is called grandfather, this figure has a very muscular body with many scars all over the body. The red-haired girl was shocked when she heard Chen Zhulao's story that he had just been killed. Currently, they are chatting in bed. Chen Zhulao recounted the entire incident that had just happened. This young man wonders how it got here. The girl explained that Albert's grandfather had found him while hunting. At that time, Chen Zhulao was found unconscious but not yet dead. While smoking a cigar, Grandpa Albert said that this place was neither the game nor the novice village that Chen Zhulao spoke of. They weren't NPCs or players either. Chen Zhulao thought that this was absolutely impossible, even though this is clearly in the game world. This young man realized that something must be wrong. Then he took out his hologram screen and showed it to the two of them. Chen Zhulao explained that there was a status window in front of them right now that showed the status bar car, equipment, and so on just like in the game. There's even a map in it. The red-haired girl actually thought that Chen Zhiliao must have had a brain shift from being attacked by a monster. The grandfather also confirmed and said that Chen Zhiliao's head injury must have been terrible, because the young man pointed in all directions that were clearly empty. Chen Zhiliao was annoyed that the GM still couldn't be contacted and Xiaomai's account ID was still nowhere to be found. This youth was completely still out of touch with the outside world. He was so annoyed that he cursed inside because if it continues like this, how can he get out of this place? Chen Zhiliao shouted in front of the hologram screen that he wanted to go home. Grandfather Albert replied that no one could get out of this place. No one can get out of the Latinaya desert. Chen Zhiliao asked the grandfather why. Don't want how wide this desert must have been end. According to him, how could he not get out? Then he asked how they got to the middle of this desert. The red-haired girl explained that several years ago she and her grandfather were hit by a thunderstorm while hunting giants in Belmaga. Suddenly they were already in that place when it came to their senses. Grandfather said that that place was the legendary Latinaya desert. Even gods could be cooped up in this desert. Only by finding the Kepri shrine will they possibly regain their freedom. Legend has it that the Latinaya desert is like an endless labyrinth. Countless people had started from the city in search of the shrine, but sadly no one had ever returned alive. The girl Sally told this story with tears in her eyes. As time went on, everyone started giving up and gave up looking for the Kepri shrine. They choose to live a good life rather than go and die. Grandpa Albert touched Chen Zhiliao's shoulder and said that every year new people were sent to that place, but he had never seen someone who could come out. So Grandpa Albert asked Chen Zhiliao to slowly accept his destiny, then told Sally to drive Chen Zhiliao around town. As Grandpa Albert and Sally walked out the door, Chen Zhiliao thought that he was sure he was still in the game. The difference is that this young man is aware that he is fully involved in the game just like in the comic. Suddenly the system appeared and announced that Chen Zhiliao had a new quest, namely revenge for Kepri's death. Astonished to see the quest, Chen Zhiliao immediately read the description below. Because Chen Zhiliao was revived under the protection of the god Kepri, Chen Zhiliao was required to help the god Kepri escape from his seal. And the next mission is to find the temple of the god Kepri in the Latinaya desert and defeat a monster named Nabris who sealed the temple to release the god Kepri. The reward of this mission is getting a key to leave the sealed Latinaya desert. Reading the instructions made Chen Zhiliao's palms curl tightly and his body was filled with determination. Chen Zhiliao was currently lying on the green grass under the shade of a tree. Even though he still didn't know why he was trapped in that place, luckily he had a goal now. The young man concluded that as long as he managed to find the Kepri temple and killed Nabris, then he would be able to get out of that place. He really had to think of a way to get out of that place. While thinking, suddenly someone called out to Chen Zhiliao in a soft voice. Apparently, it was Sally who had come looking for him in a beautiful white dress. Sally said that she had been looking for Chen Zhiliao since earlier. This young man then apologized and explained that he just wanted to take a walk to calm his mind. Then, Chen Zhiliao pointed at a desert far from the village while asking if it was the Latinaya desert. Sally replied that you could say that. This girl explained that actually the place where they live now is surrounded by the Latinaya desert. So all directions from the city are the Latinaya desert. Sally was looking in all directions as said this. Chen Zhiliao said who knows how long it will take to find the temple. Sally asked if Chen Zhiliao wanted to look for the Kepri temple. Seeing the confidence on Chen Zhiliao's face made Sally very worried. So Sally said that there was no temple at all. The one that was Chen Zhiliao would die if he went out there. Hearing that, Chen Zhiliao still walked away and said that he had already died once, so no matter what method he used, Chen Zhiliao was determined to find the temple no matter what. The two of them walked back to town. Sally still asked once again whether it was true that Chen Zhiliao really wanted to find the temple. Chen Zhiliao replied calmly that he would definitely search for the temple. Sally explains that the Latinaya desert is filled with very strong monsters. Not even Grandpa Albert dared to say that he could defeat those monsters. Chen Zhiliao asked the girl to take it easy because the fighting technique he learned was pretty great. Suddenly a large enough attack force flew to cut them both down. Chen Zhiliao, who was still a grandfather, didn't have time to respond until there was a large enough explosion. Then three men with vicious faces appeared walking to block Chen Zhiliao and Sally's path. The figure of a crew-cut haired man standing in the middle said that the prey had been found. Chen Zhiliao, who was still alive, coughed amidst the flying dust and smoke. When the dust cleared, the young man was amazed that they had survived because of Sally's strength to fend off the men's attacks. The penis man who stood in the middle was astonished because his attack was again parried by Baboon's fire prison attack. Seeing that familiar figure made Sally look irritated. Chen Zhiliao was astonished and asked Sally why did those people attack them. Sally explained that the thieving hunters in the area were more terrifying than monsters because they don't want to hunt in the Latinaya desert, so often take other people's belongings. They are a group of ruthless criminals who kill as they please. The baboon just smiled slyly at that. The youth named Babin took out two swords and flashed an extremely strange dark energy in Chen Zhiliao's eyes. The baboon said that last time Sally could run away, but this time he would not let the girl escape from his grip just like that. Hearing that, Sally immediately activated power to make her long hair fly high. Then Sally asked Chen Zhiliao to return to Grandpa Albert while he would handle this matter alone. Grandfather Albert, who was in the yard, was startled when he saw a flash of lightning. Grandfather wondered if there would be another thunderstorm. As he stepped into the house, Grandpa realized that Sally should have come back from town. Babin said he would not let Chen Zhiliao go to call the old man who was none other than Grandpa Albert. This young man asked Sally to come with him because neither girl could hurt him at all. Maybe then Baboon would let go of the idiot standing by Sally's side. Hearing this, Sally became angry and yelled at Baboon to stop having such dreams. Baboon looked at Sally with sharp eyes and told the girl not to blame himself if he was rude. Sally told Chen Zhiliao that she would detain the rascal there, so she asked the young man to leave immediately. But Chen Zhiliao rejected that because according to him the word escape had never existed in his life path. Even though the two of them had barely known each other for long, it was clear that Chen Zhiliao was not someone who could leave his friends alone. But just as this young man finished speaking, the baboon caught his face and smashed into a large tree near them. The baboon snapped at Chen Zhiliao and accused the young man of being trash. The baboon asked with a sly look on his face, who does he think this young newcomer is? How could he lie to himself by saying such nonsense? The baboon kept pressing Chen Zhiliao's face against the tree while saying that in this place it was not mouths that spoke, but strength. Now it was Chen Zhiliao's turn to grip the baboon's right arm with a sharp look in his eyes. This young man asked, is he a strange figure? figure. Is this the power a baboon mentions when it snaps its opponent's head without permission into a tree? When Chen Jalao raised his hand to strike back at the baboon, the young man managed to jump far enough away. Babin cursed inwardly because Chen Jalao's grip really sprained his wrist. Chen Jalao admits that baboons are very fast. Even though the points had been added to his agility skills, he didn't even notice the baboon's sudden attack. Sally immediately approached Chen Jalao and asked if this youth was alright. After Chen Jalao replied that he was fine, Sally immediately turned to the baboon and snapped as she asked what the young man wanted. The baboon replied screaming that he had repeatedly said he would not give up so easily. Chen Jalao knew that the young man's words were convoluted because he was so nervous in front of Sally. Chen Jalao concluded that Babin really wanted to be Sally's girlfriend. The baboon gets even more incensed when he asks if Sally has found a man by her side as a lover. And did Sally turn down a baboon's love because of that man? Sally replied that the men by her side were just friends. The baboon was annoyed to hear that. He couldn't believe that they were just friends. Babin challenges Chen Jalao to a fist fight like a gentleman. Don't be like water on a taro leaf that is easily swayed. With full strength and a sly expression, Babin said that if Chen Jalao won then he would not bother Sally anymore. Suddenly the system appears and says about a secret mission called Shadow Madness. The condition for this victory is defeating the Shadow Swordsman baboon. And the reward for this quest is a map of the lost land of Latnea. Chen Jalao was a little surprised to see this notification. He wondered if it was really possible to get out of that place with a map. Finally, this young man accepted the baboon's challenge. Hearing that, Babin immediately channeled dark power into his two swords. Sally asked Chen Jalao, is it true that this young man wants to fight baboons? She felt that Chen Jalao would not be able to win against the baboons, because baboons are the strongest shadow swordsmen in this city. Hearing that, Chen Jalao smiled and wondered if baboons were really such strong figures. Sally explained that a swordsman who was able to wield the power of the dark shadow didn't just have an advantage in absolute speed. In addition, the attack power is extraordinary. The energy sword formed from the shadows can provide a strong destructive force. Baboons might kill Chen Jalao, but Chen Jalao didn't heed Sally's words and continued to step forward to face the baboon. This young man thought he had already died once, so compared to death, the most wanted was to get away from that place. Chen Jalao kept trying to attack baboon thinking he no longer understood why his good life had become the way it was now. But what is clear is that this young man is determined to beat the baboon first enough. If he manages to defeat the baboon then he will get a map and can get out of this damn place. But suddenly the baboon was already behind him. When Chen Jalao wanted to kick the baboon, the young man suddenly changed places very quickly. Babin comments that apparently this is the only strength of a man Sally likes. Chen Jalao himself found it strange that the baboons always defended themselves and didn't attack. This young man wondered what trick the baboon was playing. Sally said to let her face the baboon alone. Chen Jalao had better go find Grandpa Albert to help him. With the power of baboons, only Grandpa can stop this young man in the city. But Chen Jalao persisted in saying that he didn't want to leave. He asked Sally not to worry because this fight had to be fought. If they win, maybe they can get out of this town. Sally was shocked to hear that. She asked what did Chen Jalao mean, and what does defeating the baboons have to do with getting out of town? Chen Jalao realized that it was indeed irrelevant and illogical until he entered the game. Stuck in it so could not log out. Then miraculously resurrected after being killed. Now the system even had this young man beat the baboon to get the map. This whole incident looks like it was accidental, but it seems someone is controlling it. Babin called Chen Jalao to wake the young man from his reverie. The baboon asked why this young man was silent. Is he just now aware of his incompetence? The baboon asked if Chen Jalao was afraid. Unfortunately, it is now too late to stop. Chen Jalao replied that of course he wasn't afraid. This young man asked in return whether the baboon who was afraid of this young man's oath had only been avoiding him since earlier. Babin says that fighting trash without weapons is not fun at all. So Babin drew one of the swords stuck in the ground and said since this was a formal fight it should be done fairly. Baboon threw the sword and was caught directly by Chen Jalao. Babin said that he didn't want Sally and his men to think that he was bullying Chen Jalao. At this point, Babin's two men realized that their boss was getting serious. Chen Jalao smiled as he said that he didn't expect a baboon to be a fair man. But this young man still clearly remembered the sudden attack from the baboon earlier. Babin denied this and said he was just reacting quickly. Chen Jalao asked Babin to stop making excuses and get into a serious duel now. Chen Jalao wanted to beat the baboon quickly to get the map. Meanwhile, the baboon himself wanted to quickly show Chen Jalao the true power of the shadows. Chen Jalao was the first to run to attack the baboons, but suddenly part of the body of the violent man disappeared and it was as if he was floating. But the baboon's body was still able to fend off the sword attack from Chen Jalao. Sally suddenly shouted warning Chen Jalao of an attack from behind. Apparently, the real baboon suddenly appeared from behind this young man and attacked him. Chen Jalao immediately turned around and fended off the attacks from the baboons that had appeared behind him. But suddenly the baboon disappeared. Chen Jalao was dumbfounded at how precarious his position was now. And sure enough, the baboon's attack this time could not be avoided by Chen Jalao and injured his shoulder quite wide. Due to that attack, Chen Jalao's HP was reduced by 300%. The system warns if the HP decreases below 300 then the quest will automatically fail. Babin told Chen Jalao to just give up because the young man surnamed Chen would not be able to beat him. Chen Jalao definitely wasn't willing to give up. The system appeared and asked if Chen Jalao wanted to use a healing skill because the system has detected a wound. Chen Jalao happily used this ability so that the wounds on his body healed and the bleeding stopped. Even his HP was restored to 100%. But fellow Babins laughed at Chen Jalao because it turned out that this young man was only a healer. Babin asked Chen Jalao to leave Sally because he thinks a healer is not worth fighting with him. Chen Jalao replied to the baboon by saying that the man was afraid of being humiliated because he would lose to a healer. The baboon was annoyed to hear that. Chen Jalao asked Babin to stop his pleasantries so they could start fighting again. The baboon that was burning with anger immediately displayed his shadow skills and said that he would show the true power of shadow swordsmanship. Right after he finished speaking, the baboon cast two more shadows that looked exactly like him. Chen Jalao was immediately alerted because his opponent could create two shadows so that they appeared to be three. Chen Jalao concluded it seems that this shadow swordsmanship relies on clones to fight. This young man also realized that the first to fight him was the clone and the real baboon attacked him from behind. Then as he turned around the real baboon reappeared behind him. So existing clones can be used to move places. Chen Jalao commented that Babin's job looked really troublesome. The baboon explained hearing this. He thought Chen Jalao was just a trash healer who should be grateful for being let go. But because Chen Jalao wants to know his true strength before the young man dies, the baboon will be happy to show the inevitable attack of shadow swordsmanship. Chen Jalao raised the sword and asked the baboon to show him that power. Then quickly this young man ran to attack the baboons again. Seeing that Chen Jalao's defense was open, when did he immediately order one of his shadows to attack the young man with black hair. Quickly the shadow slid down to attack Chen Jalao directly with his sword. So strong was the clash between the two swords that it overwhelmed them both. The baboon shadow quickly raised the sword and attacked Chen Jalao again. Occasionally it was Chen Jalao who swung the sword and attacked the shadow. Chen Jalao realized that this shadow alone was very agile and crying out attacks and attacking him. Chen Jalao was getting annoyed that holding even one clone was this difficult. Chen Jalao realized that his opponent still had two more, but when he turned to look at two more baboons, one shadow had already disappeared. Suddenly the shadow of another baboon was already standing right behind Chen Jalao and said that the youth surnamed Chen had only survived because of luck. This time he would not be so lucky. The shadow swiftly swung the sword from behind Chen Jalao until blood spurted out. Everyone was immediately astonished. However, it turned out that the one who dropped the sword and was hit by the attack was not Chen Jalao, but Baboon himself. This man even stood on his feet in shock because Chen Jalao could not only dodge his attack but also counterattack. Baboons wonder what really happened. Meanwhile, Chen Jalao dodged and jumped several meters away. Chen Jalao realized that he was close to dying from a sudden attack from a baboon. The system appeared and congratulated Chen Jalao for this young man gaining agility points. This was one of Chen Jalao's hidden skills when facing critical situations. This is also a skill that is obtained based on the player's agility. This flash allows the user to dodge physical attacks for 2 seconds, but this ability is not immune to magical attacks. Then it can collect energy from all over the body to produce critical damage of 150% in the next attack. Chen Jalao realized that if he didn't get this ability he would have died from the baboon's attack just now. Chen Jalao smiled and confidently said that now it was just a matter of cleaning up the remaining clones. The baboon laughed loudly and said that Chen Jalao had escaped again by chance. What's more, what he managed to attack was just baboon clones. Babin says that now is the start of the real game. Babin then summoned back the sword that Chen Jalao was holding. Baboons think feeling sorry for enemies only harms themselves. In his opinion, Chen Jalao was no longer to be trifled with. Baboon and his two clones were on standby with swords in each hand. Babin said he wouldn't play around anymore and asked Chen Jalao to open his eyes wide. Baboon and his two clones bring their swords together so that they now hold two spears with blades at each end. Baboon and his two clones plunged their swords into the ground creating an attack called a desolation strike. From the ground came a storm of dark shadows that surrounded Chen Jalao's body. Then from the storm of shadows appeared sword blades that tried to target Chen Jalao's body. With his dexterity, this young man managed to avoid every blade that tried to cut him. But in the end, several parts of Chen Jalao's body were hit by the sword. The baboon laughed from the shadows and said that Chen Jalao could dance to his heart's content to dodge the attack, but obviously, it wouldn't last long. The system appeared and announced that Chen Jalao's HP had decreased by 30% so he needed to heal quickly. quickly. Chen Zhilao was annoyed that without a weapon he couldn't counterattack, and could only dodge passively. Baboon suddenly appeared right in front of Chen Zhilao. Luckily this young man managed to avoid the shadow, but suddenly he felt slashed and torn by dozens of sword blades. The baboon who saw this said that he would find a good grave for Chen Zhilao, but suddenly a white shadow shot quickly behind the baboon and made everyone even more amazed. It seems that the new arrival is Grandpa Albert. He stood right behind the baboon to block Chen Zhilao's fist. With a calm look in his eyes, Grandpa Albert asked Chen Zhilao to stop. The rain fell so hard and occasionally brought thunder and lightning. Chen Zhilao's breath was jealous even under the cool rain. Even though his body was battered and covered in cuts, Chen Zhilao still seemed to have a strong determination to defeat his enemy. But Grandpa Albert once again told him to stop now. Sally approached Chen Zhilao and asked if the young man was okay. While massaging his wrist, Chen Zhilao replied that he was fine. Grandfather Albert immediately asked the two young men in front of him to go because they would soon try lightning. The baboon laughed out loud at Grandpa's attitude. Then he said with a vicious face that there had to be Grandpa Albert. He wouldn't be able to just take Sally and Chen Zhilao away. Hearing that, Grandpa Albert immediately stopped and told the baboon that if he hadn't resisted Chen Zhilao's attack earlier, the baboon would surely have died. Baboon was stunned to hear that because he had noticed a large punch flying right behind him before being stopped by Grandpa Albert. But according to him, someone who rises as a healer still can't beat him. The baboon was furious and shouted that if Grandfather had not interfered, then the baboon would have killed Chen Zhilao for sure. The system appeared and announced that Chen Zhilao's mission was successful this time, because Babin the Shadow Swordsmanship had already been declared defeated. With this, Chen Zhilao managed to get 15,000 EXP, a hidden key, and of course also a map. Chen Zhilao until shocked because the system decided that he managed to defeat the baboon. Grandpa Albert broke Chen Zhilao's surprise and immediately asked them to leave because there was going to be a thunderstorm soon. The two baboons also asked him to leave because if they stayed here during the thunderstorm they would be finished. But Babin still couldn't accept his defeat and called Chen Zhilao to go ahead and continue the fight to decide who would win between the two of them. Babin even had to be dragged away by his two men because he was determined to challenge Chen Zhilao again. Finally, Chen Zhilao was called by Sally and asked to leave immediately because the rain was getting heavier. Inside the wooden house, Chen Zhilao was told not to move too much by Sally because she was applying medicine. Currently, Chen Zhilao's entire body was covered with bandages and plasters. Sally at his bedside kept complaining that she couldn't heat the medicine properly because this young man kept moving. Chen Zhilao apologizes to Sally because he has troubled Sally and Grandpa Albert again. Sally said that the young man didn't need to apologize, and she didn't expect Chen Zhilao to be so good at attacking baboons. Regardless of what the girl by his side said, Chen Zhilao thought that this time after gaining experience, he had yet to upgrade and the injuries received were treated manually. The upgrade mechanism needs to be studied in the future. Chen Zhilao was suddenly curious and asked Sally if Baboon knew that she lived with Grandpa Albert. Sally said yes because she and the baboon grew up together, before that they were like brother and sister. Now Sally has finished treating Chen Zhilao's wound, so she stood up and thanked him. Then she went out of the wooden house because she had to help Grandpa Albert. So Sally asked Chen Zhilao to just rest first. It was raining heavily outside as Chen Zhilao looked out the window. This young man remembered that it was also raining heavily when he entered this game. He wondered somehow how his mother was doing now. Chen Zhilao was sure that his mother must be worried about him, so he had to come back soon. After completing the quest to defeat the baboons, Chen Zhilao managed to get a map of the Latinea desert. Now all he has to do is follow the signs on the map and he will soon find the shrine, then beat the boss there to get out of this game. Chen Zhilao thought he would start the next mission after the rain stopped. Suddenly the system appears and informs that this young man has got the hidden key. Chen Zhilao was astonished to read this notice and he wondered what key would open it. Chen Zhilao immediately took out the key and the system notified him that he could open white, green, purple, red, orange, and black chests. Like this, it is called a mysterious treasure chest which will be dropped randomly. Such as these can contain gems and weapons which simultaneously appear when the treasure is opened with a key. Chen Zhilao now understands that treasure chests are only dropped randomly after the battle. According to him, this is quite an interesting gift. Then Chen Zhilao took a cloak and put it on thinking that in a moment he would be able to go out when the rain stopped. Grandpa Albert entered the wooden house and was warmly welcomed by Chen Zhilao. Grandpa Albert apologized because he only had the chance to see Chen Zhilao just now. It was raining hard so Grandpa needed time to shelter his plant seeds outside. Chen Zhilao said that it didn't matter, then asked if he could help Grandpa Albert. The grandfather walked over to the bed where Chen Zhilao was resting and asked if the young man was okay. Chen Zhilao said that the grandfather didn't need to worry, he only had a few lacerations. In a few days, the wound will get better. Grandfather Albert nodded in relief at that, but he didn't expect that Chen Zhilao could win the fight with the baboon, because that young man is the strongest swordsmanship in the city. Chen Zhilao replied by telling the truth that if the baboon didn't underestimate his opponent, then he would have no chance of winning against the baboon. Grandpa Albert knew the power of baboons, but in a fight, it wasn't just a matter of strength. There are also willpower and other comprehensive factors. Chen Zhilao accidentally won this fight. Chen Zhilao asked if baboons and Sally grew up together, why are baboons acting like that now? The grandfather exhaled smoke from his mouth before replying that it was a long story. Grandpa Albert recounts that 10 years ago it was raining like it is now. Grandpa Albert and Sally had just entered the Latinea area. Just as they were passing a house and intending to stop there, they saw a strange monster attacking the residents' houses. The monster had a human body but with claws and a wolf's head. Unfortunately, Grandpa was late so the monster had killed the married couple in the house. Luckily the couple's child could still be saved. The boy was crying over his mother's body when suddenly a werewolf wanted to attack him. Luckily Grandpa Albert managed to dispel the monster with his lightning attack. Realizing that his opponent was so strong, the monster jumped away and left the village, while the boy was still crying over his mother's body, and the child is a baboon. After that, Grandpa helped bury the baboon's parents and took care of the baboon. Chen Zhilao now understood the background story between them, but what made him still don't understand why baboons seem to regard Grandpa Albert and Sally as enemies. Grandpa explains that the baboon feels his purpose in life is to find the monster that killed his parents, but this burly old man says he has persuaded the baboon to abandon his ambitions and live a good life in the city, because there are various types of monsters whose strength cannot be imagined in the Latinea desert. Even the monster that killed any old man. Even though Grandpa could fight with all his might, he dared not say that he could beat that monster, let alone a baboon. So after that, the baboons left their homes. Chen Zhilao looked very serious listening to Grandpa's story. This young man thought that Grandpa Albert just thought the monsters were too powerful, so it was obvious how terrifying the existences for the monsters were. When it felt like the chatter between them had had enough, Grandpa Albert got up and stood up to leave. Not forgetting he asked Chen Zhilao to rest a lot now. Chen Zhilao was still deep in thought because he realized that even after getting the map he would have to walk through the desert to find the temple. Meanwhile, he had no idea how many powerful monsters there were in the Latinea desert. Moreover, he had been killed by one of the monsters there. Chen Zhilao realized that with his current strength, he would probably be killed again by the monsters before he could reach the temple. The last time he fought that monster even though he got a status buff, but he still got killed easily. At this point, Chen Zhilao concluded that he had to strengthen his own body first. Because of that, Chen Zhilao called Grandpa Albert who was about to leave the house. Chen Zhilao asked grandfather to teach him how to fight. This young man excitedly said that he wanted to become stronger and wanted to find that shrine so he could live there. But Albert's grandfather still wore a headscarf and told the young man to take care of himself. Grandfather Albert stepped out of the wooden house. Chen Zhilao didn't blame him for continuing to tell Grandpa that he was serious and that he knew the way out of this place. Chen Zhilao was worried that he was going too far because he remembered Babin breaking up with Grandpa because of this. But suddenly Grandpa Albert stopped walking and said that the thunderstorm would stop tomorrow, so Chen Zhilao had to come to the mountainside tomorrow morning. If he could pass Grandpa's test then, Grandpa Albert promised to teach him how to fight. From the terrace of the house, Chen Zhilao said that Grandfather didn't need to worry and he could fulfill the requirements that Grandfather Albert gave him. As he stepped out of the wooden house, Grandpa Albert thought that somehow after he saw Chen Zhilao, it felt like he was reviving his wish to get out of this place. And from the previous fight, Grandpa Albert realized that Chen Zhilao attacked with terrifying strength. Even his thunder shield, which was the strongest defense skill, was nearly crushed by Chen Zhilao's power. Grandpa Albert concluded that it was possible that Chen Zhilao really could bring everyone out of this place. Chen Zhilao, who was still standing in the doorway, was shocked when the system appeared and notified him about the daily quests. Namely, this young man has to do a weightlifting marathon of 10,000 meters. Then he also has to do push-ups while holding the weight 3,000 times. There are also sit-ups as much as 2,000 times. Chen Zhilao realized that this was demonic training, but these additional status points were extremely important and there was no way he could miss them. So this young man hit the accept button for a daily mission that must have been pretty gruesome. The next day the sun was shining very brightly, and Chen Zhilao had already carried out several of his missions on the mountainside. While lifting a very large tree, this young man cursed in his heart because this system was so annoying that he prepared a tool to lift his weight. Now this young man has successfully done a 10 meters marathon by lifting weights. He also managed to do 13-16 push-ups while holding the weights, but he only did 984 sit-ups. According to him, however, it felt like it had been a long time since he wanted to fight for a goal. This kind of challenge is even more fun than doing all kinds of questions that feel difficult. Finally, this young man fell with a tired body. The system on his side notified him that he managed to get 4 bonus status points which were automatically added to his status. Chen Zhilao realized that he had successfully added a mono status with just these 4 points. This youth sat down and immediately looked at his status on the hologram screen, considering his healing and defense skills, then 2 points for intelligence and 2 points for vitality. Just at that moment, a girl called his name. It was Sally, who had come to bring breakfast for Chen Jilao. She came to the mountain, not finding Chen Jilao in the wooden house. When asked Grandpa Albert, she said that Chen Jilao must be on the mountainside. Chen Jilao received the food from Sally while thanking him. This young man explained that Albert's grandfather said he would be willing to teach him how to fight. So to adapt more quickly, this young man came to the mountainside early in the morning for training. Sally was a little surprised when she heard this. She asked if it was true that Grandpa promised to teach Chen Jilao how to fight. With a big smile, as he held the bun, Chen Jilao confirmed Sally's question. Hearing that, Sally thought that this was a great thing. She wondered what ability Chen Jilao would awaken. Chen Jilao was slightly surprised to hear about this ability, because according to him he was just a healer. Was it possible that he could awaken another ability? Sally replied that it was possible, because downstream is just a job bestowed by the gods. Chen Jilao's elemental attribute also needs to be given according to his ability. Like Sally, who managed to awaken the fire element, Grandpa Albert has the lightning element, and the baboon has the shadow element. Try just giving someone directions to grow while the elements determine their fighting skills. Chen Jilao smiled upon hearing Sally's explanation. He wondered to himself and was looking forward to what kind of elemental awakening would he receive. Sally explains that her real world consists of 5 continents. One of them is the continent of Porises, which is the place of origin, and the human race lives there. The place is rich in products and abundant trade is the hallmark of the continent. Even residents from other parts of the continent stop there to trade. Centered on the continent of Porises, to the west is the continent of Megra. There are many volcanoes there as well as the Dragon Knight's hometown. Above him is the eternal winter of the multi-7 continent. It was inhabited by giants and beasts and became a continent rich in minerals. To the east is a continent filled with shady forests, namely the continent of Gamma. The elven race with high magic power and all kinds of gigantic monsters live in this continent. While to the south is the Chibitic continent. That is where the dwarves live with great weapon forging skills. The continent is also known as the end of the world. Sally, who was sitting in the shade of a tree, said that legend has it that there is an endless sea that leads to the realm of the gods. It is said that if they can cross the sea, they will reach the place where the gods live. It can even get the greatest strength. At first, this girl always thought that the sea was endless and the figures of the gods were just fairy tales, but after she was trapped in this desert, she realized that the legends that people said were true. Chen Jilao bowed at Sally's side and said that what she said was true. Likewise, finding a temple and leaving the Latinea desert is not just a fairy tale. Chen Jilao tried to convince Sally that they could get out of this place. Hearing that, Sally nodded her head and smiled with a pretty face. Suddenly, a deep voice said that he did not expect that the 2 lovebirds would wake up earlier than him. The one who had just finished speaking was Grandpa Albert, who had just arrived. Sally immediately excitedly approached the grandfather. Then they walked hand in hand to approach Chen Jilao. Grandpa Albert asked whether Chen Jilao was ready to accept the test from him. Chen Jilao replied decisively that of course he was ready. Before starting the training, Grandpa Albert explained that at the start of the chaos the gods bestowed this world with many different races. Different goals are also different professions. But the only thing they all have in common is that this world was created by elementals. This world has more than just elements that human eyes can see and touch. Examples include water, fire, lightning, earth, wood, and others, while the intangible elements such as light and shadow. If Chen Jilao wanted to comprehend elemental power, then he had to stimulate elemental perception. Grandfather Albert created small lightning bolts from his 2 palms facing each other, then he could also create magic circles from this power. Then Grandpa put his palm on the ground saying to fully feel the elemental flow. Only then would one be able to discern the presence of elementals. Grandpa Albert managed to create a sizable lightning bolt from the ground he touched. This amazed Chen Jilao. Grandfather Albert explained that he cast a teleportation spell to a beast colony in the Latinea desert. Grandpa Albert managed to find the monster colony by chance while out hunting. Then Grandfather pulled out the sword he had been carrying on his back while saying that the sword's name was Azel. He has accompanied his older brother for decades. Grandpa Albert explained that after 3 days he would again unlock the teleport spell. If Chen Jilao was able to use that sword to kill the Beast King, who was the king of beasts, then Chen Jilao would pass the test when he brought back the head of the beast. Grandfather Albert warned Chen Jilao once again that once he awakens his elemental powers, then he can use the true power of this sword to kill the Beast King. If Chen Jilao decided to leave now, it was possible that he would not have the chance to return. So he could step back now if he wanted to. Chen Jilao received the sword with a smile and said that he would not regret his choice. While walking away from Grandfather, the young man added that he would make sure to bring back the Beast King's head. Chen Jilao stood above the magic circle. The system appeared and asked him to confirm the activation of the Beast King's revival quest. With full confidence, this young man also confirmed his new mission. The system also notifies that the mission started and the time is 72 hours. So with that, Chen Jilao was immediately teleported to the location that Grandfather Albert had arranged. While watching Chen Jilao leave, Grandpa Albert thought that if the orc colony had high resistance abilities, only by mastering elemental strength would he be able to kill the Beast King, because that elemental power comes from one's understanding in the face of a decision. And Chen Jilao had to understand the decision first to be able to obtain elemental powers. At this time, Chen Jilao had already landed in one of those places that were so gloomy and unfamiliar. This young man wondered if this was the location of the quest. The location is very different from the desert at that time. The sand in that place was black and there wasn't even sunlight in the sky. Even the air was not good. Since there was nothing that could be arranged, Chen Jilao decided to search for the territory of the monster colony. Chen Jilao realized that it would be difficult to defeat the boss if his level was far below that of the monster, so he has to use other people's ways to level up, for example by defeating some monsters first. While checking around, suddenly this young man felt an attack from behind. Luckily, he managed to jump and dodge the attack in time. This young man with the surname Chen was a little irritated because his opponent wanted to kill him secretly. Then it was clear in front of him a huge monster with bat wings. The monster is called Dothem and has level 20. It is the most mysterious monster in the Latinea area. This young man pulled at the hilt of the sword thinking that even if he had not activated the elemental power, the sword still could kill. And how to use the sword depends on one's abilities. So he wanted to try the sword right now. Chen Jilao immediately ran towards the monsters thinking that by continuously increasing his battle experience, he would not be a rookie anymore. According to him, no matter what kind of enemy he faces, there will be no fear in his heart, only an unlimited fighting spirit. That's why without hesitation this young man swung his sword to slash every part of the monster's body. He reckoned that as long as he could kill monsters, his X would continue to increase until he could raise his level. That way he can keep getting stronger. Even though the monster tried to attack with its tail, Chen Jilao managed to dodge the monster's attack by jumping a few meters. Then he advanced again to attack the monsters while slashing some of the tentacles that were trying to attack him. According to Chen Jilao, the thrill of being able to conquer and become stronger could even increase the pleasure of killing monsters. After dodging several times, Chen Jilao finally managed to stick the sword blade, which was still wrapped in cloth, into the sea monster's body and then swung so that the monster's body was split into 2. With that, Chen Jilao managed to gain 35,000 EXP and he rose to level 17. This young man managed to gain 15 status points. According to him, the monster's defense was really tough. But just as youth wanted to look back, dozens of the same monsters appeared again and were ready to attack Chen Jilao. The baboon who was practicing with his sword always said that the cutting power of his sword was lacking. This young man kept swinging his sword to slash the rock in front of him until it shattered. But even so, according to him, the power of this sword is still lacking. The baboon, who was still wearing a mask on his face, was out of breath. He couldn't stop thinking that he could lose to Chen Jilao, who was a healer and didn't have elemental powers yet. Chen Jilao was even capable of bringing out a lethal force that could make his body involuntarily tremble. Even he had first seen Grandpa Albert use the technique used to restrain Chen Jilao. Even that geezer looked like he could barely withstand Chen Jilao's strength with all his might. The baboon stood at the edge of the cliff wondering who this Chen Jilao really was. Chen Jilao himself was busy killing Dothem in one of the mysterious areas in the Latinea desert. This young man kept jumping to and fro while slashing monsters, until finally he managed to rise to level 25 and get 40 status points and can open a medicine shop now. The system asks if Chen Jilao wants to use 15 levels to open a medicine shop. Chen Jilao rested after killing the monsters and tried to figure out what the drugstore meant here. In Chen Jilao's opinion, this was annoying because he had gone to great lengths to kill monsters to level up, but now instead asked to open a drugstore at the expense of 15 levels. If the mechanism was to consume levels like this, it would mean that each level up would be more difficult than the previous, because later every time you open or buy goods at the mall, the fee will also be more expensive. For example, if he wants to open all hidden shops to mercenaries, then the total level he needs is 300 levels. After he counts all the items on the hologram screen, according to him, the right choice now is farming at a level that is sufficient to start so that you can open the higher parts first. But judging from his current situation, he realized that he still needed to complete the Beast King mission consuming more levels, so it's better to be armed with some medicine to guarantee its survival. According to him, this will be useful for the future, so Chen Jilao bought a recovery type medicine, which consumes only 8 levels to instantly recover 50% 10% of HP. This medicine can restore up to 300 HP per second. This ability lasts for 10 seconds with a cooldown time of 300 seconds. This young man also bought a drug called Crumb Burning Tears which consumes 10 levels to get 300% damage, as well as a burning effect that will last for 20 seconds with a cooldown time of 20 minutes. Just as Chen Zhulao had expected, the medicines in the hidden shop regenerated and increased the body's strength in proportion. The bigger the cell phone, the bigger the recovery amount. If the HP volume is 10,000 at the next level, then recovery in 10 seconds can reach 8,000 points at once. His power would later be like a bloody resurrection. Chen Zhulao then used some more consumption of medicine to open a shop and buy the Berserker of the Death skills. So he managed to get Berserker of the Death with consumption of 8 levels. Now Chen Zhulao only has 2 levels. Now he has a life guarantee so he can be more certain to win in the next duel. But suddenly this young man's stomach was rumbling so loudly that he had to open another hidden shop to buy daily necessities. Chen Zhulao thought that killing a lot of monsters would take a lot of energy, so he needed some food from the hidden shop, but now he only had 1 level, so he hesitated about whether to buy food. Until finally he found a basket of bread that can restore energy and reduce hunger even though the price is cheap. But when Chen Zhulao bought the bread and ate it, he realized that the bread had a very strong taste, and he thought Sally's food was better than those long buns. While walking through the night, this young man realized that 12 hours had passed, more or less 60 hours left before the mission ended. This youth remembered that Albert's grandfather had told him that the monster colony was in the northwest, but he chose to follow the directions on the map in order to find the colony's location. Suddenly the system appears and gives a hint that there are 45 status points that have not been allocated. Chen Zhulao must immediately make a choice and remember that the points that have been applied cannot be changed again. Chen Zhulao just remembered that he still has status points. This young man wondered where should the points be allocated. Based on Chen Zhulao's previous choice, although his strength and agility had increased greatly, his MP and defense were still too low. If later Chen Zhulao has skills that require MP, then the lack of mana will make the skills he has not run optimally and are limited. Moreover, regarding the problem that HP is too low, it can make the risk so high when there are a few mistakes when fighting. It is very likely that if faced with an opponent who has greater damage, then he can die immediately with one attack. Like when fighting the ant monsters in the desert back then. He didn't even have the chance to use recovery medicine at all. Chen Zhulao felt like he had entered university again, where you have to be good at math, physics, and chemistry to get high marks. But the only difference is that the entrance exam is only once, and this young man is confident he can do it. Chen Zhulao realized that he could gain status by increasing unlimited levels. As long as he had a strategy for adding different status points, every time he would be able to perfectly obtain the combat effectiveness he wanted. So this young man is betting 15 points on stamina and 15 points on strength, and the remaining 15 points will be divided into defense, agility, and MP, which are 5 status points each. According to him, this composition would be perfect if the battle matches the one on Earth. Now Chen Zhulao is ready to find the monster's lair and complete the mission. Sally, who was currently waiting in the village, asked Grandpa Albert if it was okay to let Chen Zhulao go alone to the monster's lair. Albert's grandfather, who was hoeing in the field, said that the girl needn't worry. After all, Chen Zhulao was already equipped with Grandpa's sword. As soon as Chen Zhulao's life was in danger, the old man could immediately teleport to save him. Sally said she also knew about it but still wondered why Grandpa Albert sent Chen Zhulao to their lair. Sally also asked why had she never heard that Grandpa Albert had been there. Grandfather Albert explained that he had just discovered the place while hunting. Grandpa Albert then said goodbye to Sally, not forgetting that the old man told Sally to make lunch. Grandfather Albert walked to the edge of the field. He knew that no one would be able to stop Chen Zhulao's determination to get out of that place, so this old geezer wanted Chen Zhulao to see for himself the horrors of the Beast King's lair and the truth of this world. That way, it was possible that Chen Zhulao would give up. But somehow, even though he knew this was an impossible task, deep down Grandfather Albert wished that Chen Zhulao would return with the head of the Beast King. If that happened, then everyone would believe that Chen Zhulao could bring them out of this place as a miracle. Meanwhile, Chen Zhulao still wandered through this strange world for 3 hours. This young man felt like the monster's lair was not far away, but suddenly I want to hear a woman's voice asking for help. A woman is seen running for help while holding her child. Chen Zhulao wondered why there were women and children in this place, and how did they get to this place. The woman approached Chen Zhulao to beg for help. The woman looked very scared with her body trembling, begging for help from Chen Zhulao. Finally, a monster with a human body appeared and was escorted by 2 giant monsters with large bodies. It seemed they were the ones after the woman. The fighting monsters in Latnia have tremendous destructive power and a lot of HP, but they are slow-moving monsters. Standing in the center was the level 40 wild orc wrestler, a low-level intelligent monster on Latnia. He is able to summon and control wild beast attacks. Chen Zhulao realized that the orc monster was at a higher level than the monsters he had faced before. There were even intelligent monsters like the ones encountered before. So this young man immediately ordered the woman and her child to withdraw. The good news from the appearance of these orcs is that it indicates that their nest is not far away. Even so, he still found it strange to have a mother and a small child in a place like this. Chen Zhulao started to wonder if they had also just been teleported to this place like him. Rassadler's monster ordered the 2 orc beasts to puff out their shoulders obediently and immediately enjoy the pleasure of chewing up their human opponent. Then ordered the 2 orc beasts to immediately attack Chen Zhulao and enjoy them afterward. Before a single monster could advance, it was already kicked violently by Chen Zhulao, then torn to pieces with the sword. After that, he was kicked again until he was thrown so far away that he was unable to stand up. Chen Zhulao realized this after upgrading his strength status to be even higher. The Rassadler monster was getting annoyed because one of his orc monsters was defeated. He asked that one big monster, why are you silent? So he ordered the orc monster to immediately go kill that human. But when the monster saw its partner falling quickly, the big monster immediately fled from the location. Rassadler screamed even more angrily as the monster ran away. He pointed at the 2 monsters as useless trash, and he said X's can live without them. The Rassadler monster confidently said he would kill that human alone. But just as he finished speaking, Chen Zhulao's sword tip was right in front of his neck. Chen Zhulao threatened the monster to drop the big oil stick and don't move, otherwise its head will fall to the ground. After the monster's weapon was dropped, Chen Zhulao asked why the monster was chasing a woman and child. Rassadler even said that he was a servant of the gods, so if a human dared to kill him, he would be punished by the gods. Annoyed to hear that, Chen Zhulao directly stabbed the monster's right side of the face without hesitation. Then this young man said that if the monster dared to speak like that again, then he would not hesitate to let go of the monster's neck. So without further ado, Chen Zhulao asked where the monster's lair was. The desperate Rassadler finally pointed to a mountain as his lair. Chen Zhulao realized that the monster wasn't lying because its location matched the position shown by the map system. The Black Rock Mountain was precisely the lair of the orcs. When it sensed that Chen Zhulao was off guard, the orc monster dashed over to the woman and child who were hiding behind the rock. He took the weaklings as captives, then said that Chen Zhulao wanted to protect the 2 of them, but now he would let the young man see the necks of the 2 weaklings being slowly broken by him. It then sucks its blood and showing its true strength. As the orc monster began to seriously exert its power, Chen Zhulao immediately dashed towards it with his feet ready to kick. But strangely, from the other side of the monster's body, there was another one who prepared to kick. Until finally the orc monster was hit by kicks on both sides of the face until he almost died with a battered face. Because it was kicked by 2 people at once, the orc monster was thrown quite far. Chen Zhulao finally caught the eye of the strange man before him. The man with blonde hair praised Chen Zhulao's kick, which was quite great. Apparently, the man with the blonde hair had come with several colleagues. Chen Zhulao asked who were they and how did they get here. The blonde-haired man replied 3 days ago he and company were mysteriously teleported to that place until they were attacked by orcs. Unfortunately, some of his friends were kidnapped by the orcs, so he followed the orcs' footprints in order to find their lair. Then later they met Chen Zhulao. The blonde-haired man introduced himself as Bras, and he was a warrior. He reached out to Chen Zhulao and said that he was happy to meet Chen Zhulao. Then he introduced a man with a hood on his head as Philorga, who was an assassin. Then he also introduced the only woman in their group named Rachel. That woman was a healer. Chen Zhulao shook Bras' hand and introduced himself. Then Bras, what was the reason for the young man being sent to this place? Chen Zhulao replied that he didn't know, but maybe the orc they just kicked out knew something about this. The orc was irritated at being treated like this. He thought that insects like humans would sooner or later all die. But just as he finished thinking like that, he was surrounded by the humans around him. Even so, the orc still said they were just a bunch of bugs, but how dare they disrespect the divine messenger? God will definitely kill them all. Chen Zhulao, who was annoyed at hearing the orc monster's words, immediately dropped his sword in front of the monster to threaten him. Then he bowed casually before Rassadler, saying he had a few questions for the monster, and if the monster doesn't want to die, he better tell everything. Rassadler looked panicked because even though he had told the truth, our Chen Zhulao also showed a friendly demeanor. The monster gave an excuse for its current status, only a few things he knew. What is known is that the gods actually caught the humans to serve as food for them, and according to him, he lived in that place according to the will of the god. He didn't know anything else but that. It was clear that the humans in front of Rassadler were currently wearing angry faces hearing the monster's explanation that sounded so unreasonable. Meanwhile, in the town of Delks, Grandpa Albert is having an important meeting with the town councilors. Albert's grandfather was considered naive because, despite all these years, he remained firm in his convictions. Even if that elder brother finds out my location, then what will he do? According to one of the councils, they won't be able to defeat the monsters guarding the shrine at all. A talking monster named Hicks. He is one of the higher ups who have the wind element. Hicks looked completely displeased that Grandpa Albert had pinned his hopes on a boy who hadn't even mastered elemental powers yet. Besides Grandpa, Albert should know the consequences of angering a god. The whole city will be in disaster because of this. So Hicks suggested Grandpa Albert go to the monster's lair to just kill the kid, then confess to the gods to ask for his forgiveness. Grandpa Albert accused Hicks because the green-haired guy thought the gods could just as he pleased butcher them and treat them like insects. Albert's grandfather said it was a shame to give another's life in exchange for what they called peace, even though the innocent villagers still think of them as heroes. Grandpa Albert accuses Hicks of dressing up his weakness beautifully so he doesn't have to dirty his own hands in stepping on other people's corpses. Hicks was obviously annoyed by this. He immediately summoned his wind power and deployed an attack on Grandpa Albert while saying that he would deal with Grandpa in the name of a god. With no intention of dodging or counterattacking, Grandpa Albert stood still where he was, until finally a protective barrier appeared and destroyed Hicks' attack. Seeing that, Hicks was getting angry, but Grandpa Albert refused to train him and chose to turn away. Grandpa Albert said that he could not enjoy life standing over other people's corpses. He will take up his weapon again to find a way out of that place to protect innocent people. In his heart, Grandpa continued he was going to fight against the god that those people believed in. Hicks brought out his full power and swore at Grandpa Albert, telling him not to look down on anyone else. But Hicks' attack was prevented by one of the counselors wearing a hood. The figure that had been silent until now finally took action, causing Hicks to swallow his anger again. Sending humans to Latinea as food for the monsters in that place. If the game NPCs in that place have no emotions, it's probably the usual setting for games like that. But after Chen met Grandpa Albert, Sally, and the others realized that they could no longer be considered mere game settings. They really looked livelier in his eyes, not just NPCs who could be trampled on for fun. Chen will not remain silent. He must find the temple of the god Khepri, then take them all out of this place. Speaking of the god Khepri, previously Chen had read Egyptian mythology in the library and knew that this god was the incarnation of the strongest god Ra among the 9 pillar gods in mythology. Chen wondered why such a powerful god could be sealed in this place. Is it for personal reasons? Then just now the monster Rassler said that he was ordered to guard this place. Chen wondered if the monster's lair was close to the Khepri temple. After looking at the map, Chen knew that the location and direction of the two places were opposite. So this young man was wondering what the monsters were guarding in this place. Could there be another god sealed in this place? Ross called Chen and said that they were ready to go to the monster's lair. Chen nodded his head as a sign that he was also ready. Chen thought that whatever kind of monsters would be encountered on the way to the monster lair, it should be pretty safe around here, Ross thought. Even though Rachel is a healer, she can use magic to create enchantments and increase the power of elementals. So the brass will let Rachel stay to protect the woman and the child. Rachel immediately understood her assignment and will protect them until Ross and the other boys return. Ross invited Chen and Ko to immediately enter the monster's lair right now. The Rassler warned them not to go to the monster's lair or they would be eaten by high-level orcs right away. Rassler didn't want to take the blame if anything happened to them because he had already warned them. Chen replied that the monsters were just afraid of being eaten with them. Immediately Rassler went berserk and said that he was Rassler, he was not at all a greedy orc and was not afraid of death. Ross immediately pulled the rope that tied the orc and told him to stop talking nonsense and walk away. Rassler kept complaining and said that they just wanted to die. The orc monster asked them to talk again. He was going to let them all go but he promised not to run away. But the three men paid no heed to his words. Rassler was completely ignored while walking down the path to the orc's lair. Meanwhile, in the advice to be precise in the center of the throne, many humans asked for help because they were roasted and even eaten by orc monsters. Several monsters brought another large cage box filled with humans to the king. It was the food they found today, so they asked the king's permission to eat all the humans. But suddenly there was a very big explosion, and all the troop orcs in the room were frozen in no time. A white-haired man told everyone not to be afraid because he was a great mage Gome. He will get all humans out of this place. The tough warrior asked everyone in the room if anyone could fight. He was sure if they killed the monster together they could get everyone in the place to leave. Great mage Gome looks angry at the monster orc for killing many innocent humans for their own desires. In his opinion, the monster's attitude was truly unforgivable. Today he would make the monsters pay back for their actions. The great mage Gome soared through the air as he mustered all his strength and attacked the orc monster king with the blizzard blade skill. The orc king remained motionless on his throne despite being attacked by hundreds of ice crystals. The crystals immediately stopped because of the king's protective barrier. Then the great mage Gome was lifted into the air by the magical power of the orc king. All these people wonder about the strength of the monsters. Then with one finger raised, the orc king who had a hideous face immediately exploded the great mage Gome's body. The extremely powerful ice mage exploded in front of everyone, so that all the remaining knights in the cave trembled in fear. Apparently, this is the real strength of the beast king, Finnel, who is level 85. Do you think Chen and company can defeat monsters this strong? Meanwhile, Chen and his new comrades were busy fighting the orc monsters that got in their way. The three of them can work together when defeating a fairly large orc monster, Rassler, until surprised to see the strength of the three of them. Moreover, Chen strength, according to him, has now grown stronger than when he first fought him. Rassler wonders who Chen is. Chen realized that the closer they were to the lair, the number of monsters increased and even their attack power and level had gotten stronger. Even though there is a reduction in level, the EXP needed to level up gradually increases according to the original level. These monsters' EXP wasn't low, but it was clear that their level increase had slowed down to the point where they hadn't leveled up yet. Ross asked if Chen still hadn't adapted to the fierce battle just now. Ross also realized that even though the monsters they had just fought were moving slowly, it still took effort to kill them. However, this was the first time he had seen someone capable of killing monsters without mastery of elemental powers. Ross added that Chen seemed like the person who was fated to join his group, because Ross admired Chen If they can get out, Ross asked Chen to join their guild. Chen was a little shocked to hear about the guild. Ross explained that if there was a girl in the guild with a cute face, he could introduce her to Chen for free, because bros guessed that Chen would like noble women. But Chen didn't understand what Ross was saying at all. But suddenly Ross' partner interrupted when he said that the entrance to the cave seemed to be already in front of them. Chen also asked the resident, is that the entrance? But the orc monster managed to untie its bonds and escape. Ross laughed, realizing the monster took the opportunity to escape while they were busy fighting. Rassler ran as hard as he could into his lair. He intended to inform the beast king that there was a human invasion. Maybe then the king will give him a gift. Chen and 2 others entered the cave. Ross was starting to smell the orcs, so he knew the Rassler wasn't lying to them. The 3 of them walked down the cave accompanied by torchlight. Around the cave a lot of scattered human skulls. They continued to enter the cave without losing their sense of alert. After walking for a while, Ross started to wonder because it had been a while since they walked, let alone orcs, they didn't even see a single shadow of a monster. Finally, they saw 3 roads forks. Since they had to split up, Ross placed a fire symbol on each of his 2 partners' palms. Ross said that it was a symbol of fire. Since they were going their separate ways, if one of them saw a clue or was in danger, they could cast a spell and send each other over to help. Ross said he would go directly to the left path, Philor to the right hole, while Chen would enter the middle one. Ross reminded his 2 friends once again not to forget to cast the spell he had just been taught in case they were in danger. The 3 of them entered together into the cave hole. While running through the caves, Chen thought the only best way was to level up quickly, but how could he possibly do that if there were no orcs around the area? Until he finally stopped when he heard the sound of someone chewing loudly. In front of Chen was now a monster named Hollow Diggergal level 47. They were souls left behind by gods in hell. They have a deadly bite, they are afraid of sunlight, and they are flocking creatures. The group of monsters turned to Chen together. The presence of these monsters was indeed what Chen wanted, but if their number turned out to be this much, it was clear that even Chen himself would be confused about defeating them. The number of these monsters is so great because they inhabit the small mountains that are in the cave. Now the monsters roared together to attack Chen One of the orc monsters reported to the king that they had the arrival of 3 insect intruders. However, they had just entered the trap separately. The monsters were sure they must have been torn to pieces by the ghouls that were in the trap. Sure enough, the ghoul beasts were eager to pounce on Chen but they were slashed by him before they managed to touch Chen body. This young man realized that ghoul monsters weren't strong, but there were plenty of them. The amount of EXP is also quite large. Therefore, every time he manages to kill 10 ghouls, he gains 20,000 EXP. Chen was so excited as he jumped toward the crowd of monsters and slashed them one by one. Even so, the efficiency of killing them one by one was too time consuming. Now the amount of XP each level has risen to an immeasurable amount. This young man realized he didn't have much time to keep struggling in that place all the time. Chen tried as fast as possible to cut down all the ghoul monsters that got in his way, until finally the system appeared and announced that 99 ghoul monsters had been killed. That way Chen managed to rise to level 14. That way he also got a hidden level that reached 50 thanks to his status configuration and ability in fighting. This young man is also entitled to get 3 skills. First, he got the skill job. This punishment sacred light skill consumes 100 MP to restore 500 HP accompanied by 500 secret damage to opponents within 3 meters. This secret damage skill can ignore armor and magic shields. The second job skill is secret slash. This skill consumes 100 MB instant attack on 28 normal within 5 meters. Every 60% in critical damage can recover 5% HP when attacking. Meanwhile, the third skill is secret movement. This skill consumes 70 MP, removes debuffs, and moves speed buffs up to 20% in just 40 seconds. Each opponent killed during the usage duration will recover 3% HP. Chen Zhilao was told to choose 2 of the 3 skills. This young man realized that judging from the explanation of skills, it was quite difficult to determine. According to him, the combination of secret movement and punishment secret light skills is good, while the combination of secret slash and secret movement has a double healing effect. In short, all melee attacks have a healing effect. Even Chen Zhilao can use secret movements to increase movement speed when approaching enemies. Then he can use only secret light or secret slice body. Unfortunately, the attack range of the secret slash and punishment secret light is too short. If you are not close to your opponent, then it is not a good choice if only for the sake of recovering blood. So Chen Zhilao finally chose the secret movement and secret slash. The system immediately processes the 2 skills of his choice and creates a new skill. Chen Zhilao wondered how the other 2 comrades were somehow doing. Did they have the same problem as him? But there was no response yet from the magic spell that was in his palm, so they should be fine by now. Seeing that many ghoul monsters were attacking him again, Chen Zhilao was even more excited to try the skill he had just combined and immediately ran through the crowd of monsters. Meanwhile, Ross is also busy fighting a monster using his Hellfire Break skill. All the monsters in front of him were immediately roasted with his fire skill. Suddenly a girl's voice hummed melodiously. All of the monsters immediately turned their heads back and prostrated before his figure. A demonic woman walked gracefully while continuously humming. Ross knew that figure was controlling the ghouls to attack him. Ross was determined to turn his figure into ashes immediately, but suddenly a lot of shadowy hands came out of the ground where Ross was stepping on. Instantly the shadow's hand prevented and restrained Ross until he couldn't move. The blonde-haired youth realized that it was the demonic woman's singing voice that made his body's strength weaken. While his opponent was immobile, the demonic woman approached him and groped his body. The demonic woman took out her extremely long tongue from her mouth as she said it had been a long time since she had eaten nutritious insects like humans, so the woman would slowly enjoy her meal this time. Ross started cursing inside and wondered if he would die in this place now. It was precisely at this time that Chen Zhilao came over and slashed both of the arms of the demonic woman who was trying to injure Ross' body. Chen Zhilao asked the colleague if he made it on time. The demon girl was astonished to see that Chen Zhilao was safe. He asked shouldn't the crane kill Chen Zhilao. Hearing such a question, Chen Zhilao immediately threw the head of a monster and asked if the figure the girl was referring to was the monster whose head he had slashed off. Chen Zhilao said that Derek was stronger than the other ghouls, but according to him the figure of the crane is still too easy to kill. Seeing that one of her comrades had died, the demonic woman was furious and immediately screamed very loudly. Ross warns Chen Zhilao not to let him hear the demonic woman singing as it has the effect of paralyzing his opponent's strength. The demon girl laughed in satisfaction as she already felt that Chen Zhilao had been impacted by her singing. She was certain that Chen Zhilao would not have the strength to attack again. But just as he finished thinking that, Chen Zhilao slashed his head with a lightning-fast sacred movement skill. Chen Zhilao commented that the singing of the demonic woman was terrible. Meanwhile, Ross was dumbfounded by Chen Zhilao's abilities. Just as they were about to breathe, the seals on their hands suddenly burned. Instantly the 2 of them realized that their partner named Phylorga was definitely in danger right now. On the way that Phylorga would pass, a huge dragon named Serpent Hellfire who was level 55 was spewing flames toward Phylorga. This dragon is a monster created from hellfire with the status of hellfire on its body. So strong was the dragon's burst of fire that it shattered Phylorga's defensive stone. This young man realized that the difference in strength with the dragon beast in front of him was very far. Just surviving the monster's attack alone was difficult, so there was no way he could kill the monster. When his defensive stone shattered, Phylorga was thrown so far that she hit the cave wall. Tonight's youth even coughed up blood and fell on the ground. Right before his eyes, the Mana beast opened its mouth and prepared to pounce on it. It was at this moment Chen Zhilao came as fast as lightning and immediately stood in front of the dragon beast, then directly slashed it with a single strike. The dragon monster was thrown away and hit the cave wall. Chen Zhilao then apologized to Phylorga because they were late. Phylorga didn't have time to reply because she was deep in thought when she saw how strong Chen Zhilao was. Ross, who was standing by Phylorga's side, said that the path they took was a trap. So it seemed that the path Phylorga took was the right path to the monster's main lair. Without saying anything, Phylorga smiled and looked at his 2 friends to get new hope now. Ross reached out to help Phylorga get up, asking if the young man was okay. Phylorga casually replied that she was fine since she wasn't dead. But Phylorga explained that the giant snake was very strong. Never had he seen such a powerful being. It was as if the snake monster was just like the monsters in the legends. Phylorga added that this was just the giant snake. What if they faced the beast king? They would be killed in an instant. Hearing Phylorga's words, Chen Zhilao replied by saying it wasn't the beast king who killed you, but your fear. Fear will only lead someone faster to death. Only a beast king. Even though he didn't know how strong the creature was, this young man promised they would get out of Latinea together. Listen to their comrades. For the sake of their freedom, even if Chen Zhilao had to fight to his last breath, he would keep fighting until the end. Right after Chen Zhilao said that the snake beast rose again and prepared to fight them, Chen Zhilao shouted to his comrades that they would fight the monsters together. After what Chen Zhilao said, the excitement in the hearts of the 2 comrades returned and they prepared to attack the monster together. Ross kicked the monster with the power of his powerful fire kick. As the snake monster's attention turned to Ross, Phylorga prepared to unleash his elemental power while raising his arms in front of his face. This young man was determined he didn't want to be a loser anymore. This time he will do his best. Then Phylorga shouted out the hands of Buddhist to awaken his elemental powers. With that out came a huge Buddha arm from the ground which immediately grabbed the giant snake. While the snake monster was unable to spit out flames, Chen Zhilao jumped off the cliff and directly thrust his sword right above the monster's head. Now Chen Zhilao must try his best to continue to crush the snake's extremely tough scales. Chen Zhilao raised his sword and thrust once more with greater force. The system appeared and announced that the giant snake's scales had been damaged by up to 20%. When Chen Zhilao continued to stick his sword deeper and deeper, his physique was getting destroyed by 100%. It was at this moment Chen Zhilao swung his sword and shouted as the young man's blade finally sliced through the snake monster's body from head to toe. Ross and Phylorga were overjoyed to see the monster finally die. They also managed to kill the Hellfire Serpent and get 200,000 EXP. Another prize for killing the Hellfire Serpent is getting hidden equipment called the Hellfire Gauntlet. This glove can increase 15 points of strength, 15 points of stamina, and 10 points of mana, and also can add 35% points to fire damage. The explanation is being able to use the fire state on the gauntlet forged by Hicks. These gloves were high-level attack and defense equipment in hell. By obtaining this equipment along with its additional stats, Chen Zhilao felt like he had jumped several levels up. So Chen Zhilao felt happy when he tried on the gloves. Meanwhile, Ross found Chen Zhilao very strange. Because they had only been apart for a while, Chen Zhilao's strength had already increased drastically. Ross was wondering in his heart who Chen Zhilao was. Suddenly the 3 of them turned alert when they heard the sound of approaching footsteps. It was the sound of footsteps from the monster Riddler who accidentally bumped into them again. Quickly, Chen Zhilao and Ross immediately gave the monster another kick, causing it to be thrown several meters and battered. Ross with an annoyed face asked the monster why did he run first to the entrance. Riddler replied that he just gotten lost because it seemed the king beast had activated a trap. Chen Zhilao only now understood his condition. No wonder the 2 of them faced so many ghoul beasts. After Riddler stood up, he was immediately kicked by Ross and asked to go first. If the monster didn't show the right path now, then he would soon die. Finally, the Riddler had no other choice but to tell and show the actual path leading to the main hall of the king's throne. The Riddler advanced past the 3 of them and cast a strange spell that made a stone door open immediately. Meanwhile, in the city, the rainstorm returned. Thunder rumbled across the night sky. Grandpa Albert was standing in his room facing a wooden door with mixed feelings. Slowly, the old man held the cupboard door handle and then opened it slowly. The cupboard contained his special armor. Suddenly, someone was standing behind Grandpa Albert and said that finally, after hesitating for a long time, Grandpa Albert opened the cupboard again. Boban, the figure who was inviting Grandpa Albert to talk, also added that Grandpa used to forbid him and Sally from approaching the room, making them both curious what's in the cupboard. It's only the grandfather's war armor. Boban took care of his words and said that perhaps what was sealed in this place was the hope of getting out of there. Seeing Boban standing behind him made Grandpa wonder, what had this young man been there? Because he wasn't even aware of Boban's existence. The young man with spiky hair said that he heard Grandfather forming a group to leave Latinea. Maybe later Grandpa Albert will meet the monster that killed his parents. Since leaving the house, Grandfather Boban has been training hard for years for this moment. So he wants to go with Grandpa, or this time the old man will still stop him. Meanwhile, in Goa, Ross keeps reminding Monster Rashidler so he doesn't mess with them anymore. If that master acted up even a little, then the Ross would kill him on the spot. Rashidler didn't dare move any further after receiving such a threat. He pointed ahead saying that the nest was up ahead, so the beast king must be in there too. Then Chen Zhilao asked if Rashidler knew the location of the people captured and locked up by the orcs. Rashidler replied that he knew their location well. Chen Zhilao asked Ross and Phylorga to quickly save their friends after entering the main hall. Ross instead asked if he and Phylorga were a burden to Chen Zhilao. They reminded Chen Zhilao not to be overly confident after saving the 2 of them. According to Ross, Chen Zhilao's strength alone would not be enough to fight the beast king after all. Chen Zhilao wanted to answer Ross' words, but suddenly he received an emergency warning notification from the system that the unknown boss was was now right in front of him. The percentage chance of survival with Chen Zhilao's strength is now only 10%. Seeing the notification, this young man was immediately dumbfounded. Even though he had worked hard to level up, even though he had yet to master elemental powers, Zhilao knew he had to be stronger than this to win. Seeing Chen Zhilao silent, Philorga asked what was wrong with that young man. Chen Zhilao appeared that he was okay, and he just didn't want to hurt innocent people because of his business. Then who asked the two of them to immediately save their friends after they entered. So let Chen Zhilao personally face the Beast King. Hearing that, Ross immediately walked together that it was impossible. He would never leave his friend alone in danger. Chen Zhilao said that the monsters inside were not as easy as they had imagined. Even their winning percentage is only 10%. Ross asked really what if it was only 10%. If it wasn't for being saved by Zhilao, they would have died in this place long ago. Even if there was no chance of winning, they would not run alone. Ross asked Philorga what he thought of it. The young man was silent and nodded in confirmation of Ross's words. Chen Zhilao was speechless listening to the two of them. This young man remembered that since he was a child, whether at school or a kendo learning place, he had to deal with any problem and solve it himself. Even though he never suffered, he did everything alone. But now he is no longer alone. Chen Zhilao felt hope growing in his heart. Suddenly the Riddler said that just one step further ahead was the King's Hall. So he asked if things were okay and just waited for them outside. Or maybe he will also be killed by the Beast King. Chen Zhilao, Ross, and Philorga stared intently at the large door in front of them. Finally, Chen Zhilao nodded when he met Ross' eyes. The three of them finally entered together into the King's Hall. As soon as he entered the enormous hall, Chen Zhilao was amazed that there was no one in this place. So the young man with the Chen surname asked the Riddler, was this the King's place? Then where is he now? The Riddler replied that he didn't know that usually the security around the King's place was very tight, but for some reason, it was quiet now. Suddenly there was a roar as the entrance was closed by a large rock. Then suddenly Flora screamed as he was lifted by the magical power of the Orc King. Chen Zhilao turned towards the throne and saw Fenrir the Beast King sitting casually as he raised a finger to control Philorga's body. Then quickly the young man's body seemed to be crushed from the inside until he vomited blood. Enraged that one of his comrades was toyed with like that, Chen Zhilao immediately dashed toward the King's throne. When he arrived right above the Monster King, this young man also raised his weapon to attack the Beast King. Unfortunately, this young man's attack was successfully parried by the King's barrier. Then Chen Zhilao was thrown several meters. Due to Zhilao's attack, the Beast King dropped Philorga's body. Luckily, Ross jumped in time to catch Philorga's body so his partner's body didn't fall to the ground. Chen Zhilao was astonished in his heart when the Beast King suddenly sat on the throne. He wondered, since when was that monster sitting there? This young man also felt surprised because his attack just now, which was strong enough, was easily blocked by the King's barrier. Ross asked Philorga not to push herself, because at this time his partner was back on standby in the middle of the hall to attack the King. With his remaining strength, Philorga created a large sword that headed straight for the Monster King. Above the blade, there was Ross who jumped to attack the King of Monsters from above. So Philorga attacked the Monster King's barrier from the front, Ross attacked with his fiery kick from above, and Chen Zhilao attacked the Monster King from behind. But even though the defensive walls had been attacked from all directions, the King of the Monsters remained relaxed, even now flashing a smile and slowly raising both hands. With that, the two people who were attacking the King of Monsters were instantly thrown far away. But Chen Zhilao still tried to block the King's attack with his sword. This young man cursed in his heart because before he thought the Monster King's skill could only be used on the front, he didn't expect his whole body to be protected by a barrier. Besides that, this Monster King also has terrible attack power. After the Monster King stopped attacking, Chen Zhilao asked his two comrades if they were alright. Ross replied that they were both still safe. Chen Zhilao then asked himself what exactly was this boss monster's ability, and what must be done to defeat the boss monster.